translations for you. Hebrews 13, verse 4. You can look at your translation. Hebrews 13, verse 4. The Amplified says this: let marriage be held in honor, esteemed worthy of praise, great pride, especially dear in all things. ASV is let marriage life be honored among all of you. Interesting, it says let marriage life. Another one says have respect for marriage. Another one said let marriage be held every way in honor. What does God say in Hebrews 13, verse 4, the A part of the verse? He's saying marriage has honor. Let's say the non-King James way. Marriage has value. Has value. And nothing challenges value like conflict. Have you noticed that? Nothing challenges value like conflict. But conflict, think about it like this though. But normally, conflict is not how marriage begins, right? You're dressed better at your wedding than you'll ever be dressed the rest of your life. You have food most likely better than you've ever had the rest of your life. All your friends will be giving you more gifts than they're ever given you in your life. It's like there's beauty, there's joy, there's excitement. This is what I want. This is what I see. It's easy. You say, I do. Of course, who wouldn't say I do to that? She looks the best. He looks the best. I want that. I do. It's fun. It's attractive. At this point in the marriage, value is at an all-time high, right? And why is that? Because the value is defined by sight. That's why. It will not look any better than it looks right now, by sight. So when you hear those vows and sickness and health and poverty and bad, you're like, what are you talking about? Look at this room. Have you seen the gift table? Look at this tuxedo. Look at this suit. Look at that dress. Of course not. No one's thinking about those vows on that day. How could it possibly not be good? How could there possibly be bad times? Of course I do. And there's life after I do. Cut the cake, open the boxes, guests go home, and marriage actually begins. After there is unexplained discoveries, like bad habits. There's differences of opinion, there's debates, there's mistakes, there's hidden motives, there's interference from family and friends and others, possibly sin, misunderstanding, selfishness, false, all that stuff comes out. You know why? Because it's two human beings. You can't put makeup over that. You can't put a tuxedo over that. You can't bring a wedding cake and hide that. It's two human beings. And all those things I just said, they feed and breed conflict in any relationship, never mind marriage. So for you to say we don't have conflict in your marriage, you're just not human. You do. We do. Right? We are married to Christ. Romans 7 talks about that. Ephesians 5 talks about that. But if we don't know how to handle in our marriage conflict with God, we could be Christians with a miserable marriage. Can be. And conflict comes three ways in a marriage. Number one, unexpectedly. Most of the time it's unexpected. Number two, unprepared. You feel almost ambushed when it happens, like, what? Where's this coming from? You're not prepared for it. And then number three, unevenly. One person has a problem, the other one usually doesn't. But then because I have a problem, you're going to have a problem. Right? So three ways. Conflict comes three ways. Unexpectedly, unprepared, you're not prepared for it, and unevenly. You both rarely get angry at the same time. It's rare. Right? And why does conflict kind of happen? Because in James 3:2, offenses will come. It just will. Right? In all things you offend somebody. Right? Matthew 18:7, you will be offended, and you will offend. And I'll say in a marriage, more than half the time it's unintentional. I don't like the way you breathe. What? Huh? Ridiculous things. And when they come, the value of the marriage is at crisis. The value of the marriage comes under crisis. Not to God. What's interesting is God's okay with it, but to us, Either collectively or individually, we feel like the marriage is in trouble. And if we're not careful, we will define the value of the marriage according to the conflict. And if we're not careful, we'll define the value of the other person according to the conflict. And if we're not careful, we'll define our own value based upon the conflict. We always fight. I must be the reason something's wrong with me. We always fight. She or he is the reason something's wrong with them. We always fight. Something's wrong with our marriage. Let me give you some myths about conflict in a marriage. I would say basically, number one, the myth about, I wrote some of these myths down earlier today. That was fun. That was crazy fun. But there's some myths about marriage.
How many you got?
A lot. Number one, a good or godly marriage has no conflict. You know what's so funny? You always think that your marriage is the worst marriage because you think every other marriage has no conflict. So obviously we're horrible. A good or godly marriage has no conflict. Another myth, all marital conflict is reasonable. It's a myth. You'd be shocked at the things that husbands and wives argue or fight about. Sometimes it's so basic. You missed the exit. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. You missed the exit. Number three, in all marital conflicts, someone is wrong. So the battle is who can assign blame to the other person. That's the war, really, assigning blame. Number four, solutions in marital conflict always begin with compromise. But actually, they begin with another word, sacrifice. But we run to compromise because compromise is the first thing you grab. Because you use that in your other relationships. So you tend to, important to your marriage, your relationship skills in your other relationships, and you use that in your marriage. And your marriage is a unique relationship, unlike any other relationship in your life. And things and tricks and strategies that you worked in your other relationships, on your job, with your friends, with your family, those don't work in your marriage. They don't work. Because here's the problem with compromise. You don't get what you want. They only get part of what they want, so nobody's satisfied. How does compromise work? We all lose together. Is that winning? Compromise has no winners, it just has survivors. That's compromise. So these are myths. Another myth. Solutions should be reasonable. They might not be. Solutions should be fair. They may not be. Solutions should be even. They will not be. The only solution is really biblical. But I'll say this about even. That's a bad word in marriage. Here's why. Nothing's even. Nothing is even. Your love is not even. Your walk with God's are not even. Nothing is even in a marriage. You didn't get married because you're even. This is not mechanical. Think 0.5 and 0.5. There are some areas where you might be more than the other one. And some areas they may be more than you. Get this straight. There is balance, but there isn't even. There's a difference in that. So, going back to my original thought, conflict will challenge value, but it should never change value. It will challenge it, but it should never change it. It should never destroy it. And ultimately, conflict can be used to build value, but it should never remove it. It should never change it, unless to improve it. And the ultimate solution to all marital conflicts is building value. Building value, really. Not the expectation of change. The expectation of change in your marriage or in your spouse does not always build value. It's not the victory of getting my way, because you're right on Monday and you're wrong on Tuesday. And by the way, when you prove that your spouse is wrong, you got to get in the bed with the person you just proved wrong. You're literally sleeping with the enemy. Now that you've made her wrong, let's go to bed. One eye open. And this is an interesting one. Remember that the solution for marital conflict always begins with me. It's always interesting when I've counseled marriages. People always come with me with their list of what's wrong with the other person, how they need to change, how something's wrong with them. I've only had in almost a quarter century of marital counseling, I've only had 2 people say, Pastor, I'm the one. It's me. We're here because of me. Only 2. Only 2. Many men will tell you how great they are, but a faithful man who can find. Proverbs 20, verse 6. It's interesting. It starts with me. Building value in my spouse. The ultimate solution of marital conflict is building value in my spouse. Notice I didn't say when they're right or when they're wrong, because that's not the issue. If I build value, that's right and wrong can be so, that's moral. The cross is not about right and wrong. It's higher than that. The relationship we have with our spouse, that's spiritual, requires building value. What does that require? Number 1, that's an exercise of faith. Because God may see value in my spouse that I don't see. It requires faith. Number 2, it requires the capacity of God's character, grace. Because my natural character does not build value in anything. The flesh removes value. That's why you can't trust it in Philippians chapter 3. Number 3, it requires a discernment of the Spirit, because only the Holy Spirit can show you how to properly love and minister to anybody, but especially your wife or your husband. Number 4, when you say you love your spouse, conflict is where you prove it.
Wow.
That's the litmus test of love, conflict. Motivation of love. That's the key. I'm going to fast forward this. I have more to say, but I'm going to fast forward this. I want to give you some things to use, and then we'll stop. Some ideas for resolving marital conflict. Well, let me say it this way. Ideas for building value in a marital conflict. Okay, you ready? You can listen to this. You can watch this or watch this again and hear them all. I want to be quick. I don't want to be long. You guys have heard a lot of talking today. Here's ideas for building value in marital conflict. Number 1, love sometimes, this is a good one, is a closed mouth, but never a closed mind. It's a closed mouth, but never a closed mind. You don't always have to talk. Even when you're right, you don't always have to talk. And by the way, your spouse is okay with you not talking if they know your mind is open to what they have to say. Right? How do I show them I have a closed mind? I don't pay attention to what they have to say. That's a closed mind. So I'll say it again. Number 1 is love is sometimes a closed mouth, but never a closed mind. Number 2, how do I build value, especially in a marital conflict? Keep short accounts. Be willing to bear the wrong. 1 Corinthians 6, bear it. Bear the wrong, move on. Everybody loves the idea of sacrifice except when they have to do it. Bear the wrong. Can you bear the wrong? Can you be wrong here? I told you, I didn't take. Be wrong. It's okay. Sometimes your spouse is building a case to prove you wrong. Admit you're wrong. Wait a minute, I'm not finished showing you how wrong you are. Shortcut that argument. Keep short accounts. I didn't do that. I was wrong. There's nothing wrong with being wrong in your marriage when there's a plan to get past that. But when you spend half your argument fighting the fact that you're wrong, fighting and fighting, I'm not wrong, I'm not wrong, I'm not wrong, how are you winning? Number 3, forgiveness is not just an act, it's an attitude. Forgiveness is not just an act, it's an attitude. See, if I have an attitude of forgiveness, before I have to forgive, I'm already ready to forgive you.
Wow, that's good.
So most of us, we're not even thinking about having to forgive, and then we have to forgive. You know what that's called? Proactive forgiveness. I have an attitude of forgiveness before I have to forgive. Number 4, let's take it to the Lord. We're Christians. Ask God. Don't ask God for more money, Don't ask God for children or better sex. Ask God how to love and encourage and build your spouse. Ask him for that. It's shocking to me the things that spouses pray to God for their marriage. Ask him for how to build value. Ask him, God, help me. You have not, in James chapter 1, verse 5. Because you don't ask in faith and ask in wisdom. He that lacks wisdom, let him ask and ask in faith. You have not because you ask not. Matthew 7:7. Ask, seek, knock, ask. Don't ask for the new job. Ask for ways to build value in my spouse. And that will pay you better than the job will. Next, number 5. Learn to accept the reality that there is a difference between who God has made your spouse to be and who you want them to be. I'll say that again slowly. Learn to accept the reality that there's a great difference between who God has made your spouse to be and who you want them to be. Some people think you're going to marry somebody and change them. She's not what I want, but when I get done, I'm going to build a woman. I'm going to build a man. You can't even build yourself. There's this gap between what you want your spouse to be and what God has actually made them to be. And can you accept and love what God has made them to be? I wanted him to be a scientist, and he's a garbage truck driver. Okay. Can I love him right there? Can I? Next. Words count. Especially in your marriage. Use words like money. Carefully, specifically, and purposely. Words count. Use them like money. Carefully, specifically, purposely. If you have to talk something over with your spouse and you know it's a conflict, I highly recommend write out everything you want to say. Read it out loud to yourself and then wait a day. Write it out. Read it out loud. Hear how it sounds and then wait a day. Wait a day. In Zechariah 8 verse 16, clear, straight communication. Clear, straight communication. I mentioned this earlier. Be careful that your passion doesn't bury your principle. Sometimes you're so passionate in what you want to say that the person has no capacity to even hear your principle. You chew them out. You ever said this statement? This is when you know you've talked too much. I've said all that to say. When you should have just said it. What you've just told me is you've just given me a whole truckload of passion just to say this. So words count. Matthew chapter 12, 34 to 36. You'll be judged for every idle word. Words count. Job 6:25. Oh, how forcible are right words. Number 7. This is a good one. During conflict. NRN. Learn those initials. NRN. Know what it means? Not right now. One of the big issues in couples when they're having a disagreement, remember, one of them is more upset than the other. We got to talk about this right now. I just got off work. I've been in the pit for 12 hours, and you want to have a heart-to-heart talk about your mother's shoe size. Or, I've been home all day, doing all these things, and now you want to talk, it's 2 a.m, and now is the time to have that serious conversation that's going to change our marriage. NRN. Or we're at a party, or we're at a social event, and you're steaming because I've done and said something that's upset you, and you want to deal with it right now. NRN. So oftentimes we have our conflicts in the wrong venue or in the wrong mood. And we wonder why it's explosive. Because maybe this is not the place or this is not the time that your spouse is not ready for that conversation. Just because you're ready doesn't mean they're NRN, not right now. I use it with my wife all the time. She uses it with me. You have to agree. But when your spouse says that to you, okay, they've got an agreed upon amount of time to come back to you and say, okay, we couldn't talk about it then, can we talk about it now? What's surprising is that when you wait, it kind of brings things down a little bit. The passion goes down a little bit, and the principle is clearer. It's like, you ever notice when you were little, and you felt like you start crying, and your mother comes, you try to explain it, and she just has to calm you down first. Because you've got a whole lot of passion. You got to turn those emotions down a little bit, get those endorphins to go down a little bit, that adrenaline's running. Okay, now what happened? I fell off my bike. Okay, let's clean it up. That's it. But it's 3 hours of okay? And our end. Not right now. Number 8. Here's how you build value in your marital conflicts. Never weaponize the past for a present conflict. Never weaponize the past for a present conflict. Okay? Maybe it's related, but it's not necessary or germane to the conversation. Don't try to make it related. It doesn't put the fire out, it adds fuel to it. And here's what happens a lot of times. We link conflicts. You did this, and you also did that, and this is just like that, and this is just like that, and this is, we suddenly one conflict is 16. Right? You get, Pastor Adams said it right, you get categorical conflict. You just start reaching for conflict and putting them into, wait a minute, it's like making a stew, whatever's in the kitchen, put that in there too, the thing's huge. Never weaponize the past for the present. God doesn't do that with you. Remember if God said, yeah, I know, 17 years ago, yeah, you had that beer, and also you also ran that stop sign, and you lied that day. Wait, ho. Let me tell you how God doesn't weaponize the past. In John 21, he never mentioned Peter's failure to him. At that point in his life, that was the greatest failure of his life, and Jesus never mentioned it. Never mentioned it. He said, Peter, you love me? Go feed my sheep. And Peter, of course, what about him? What is that to you? If I tell him to live or die, it's up to me. Go. God doesn't weaponize your past. Don't do it against your spouse. Because it removes value. Next, number 9. Never use shame on your spouse, especially in conflict. Shame is actually the opposite of grace. Never use shame. Here's why it doesn't work. In the eyes of God, the two are one. So when you shame your spouse, you're shaming yourself. You cannot push them down to lift yourself up. Were you not married, that's possible. But since you're married, you can't destroy your spouse and build yourself because it's you. When you're up, they're up. When you're down, they're down. But you can't push one down. It's delusional. See, here's the thing about shame. It is the painful self-awareness that you have lost or lack value. That is shame. The painful self-awareness that you have lacked or lost some kind of value. And when your spouse uses shame, they're stealing value from you. Next, concerning building value in marital conflicts. The solution is never try harder. The solution is never fix the other person. The solution is never fix yourself. Conflict is not resolved by you or the other person fixing anything. If you could fix yourself, Jesus Christ did not have to die. So if you can't fix yourself, how can somebody else fix you? So when you say, I want you to try harder, okay? Because that's the formula for success in the Bible, right? Trying. All trying does is appease the expectations of your spouse, but it never deals with the issue. Next, number 11 actually. Conflict is never the time for instruction. Don't ever try to teach your spouse when it's in the middle of conflict. You know why? Because you but you become a parent. The only person who teaches in conflict is a parent. And when you try to teach your spouse in the middle of conflict, you have just become the mother and they are the son. You've become the father and they are the daughter. Conflict is not a time for instruction, it's a time for investment. Next, never address, solve, or resolve conflict before your children. You will produce generational conflict. You have a legacy of conflict in your family. Never address, solve, or resolve conflict before your children. I remember when I got married to my wife, I said to her, I don't care what's happening in front of our children, I'll never argue with you. If you try, I'll just walk away. I won't do it. We might not get it right, but I'm not going to impose that on the next generation. I'm not going to do it. And if you have, God bless you, but I'm telling you right now, don't do it. If they're in the room, if they're in the house, get out, drive away, go somewhere. Just don't do it. Next, never resolve conflict in your own house. Never resolve conflict in your own house. I try not to counsel marriages in their own house. I don't want to turn that place that's supposed to be a place of peace into the UN building. I don't want to connect conflict with the house. So if you want to resolve conflict with your spouse, never do it at home. Go out, take a drive, take a walk, go somewhere, but don't do it in the house. Protect your house. Keep your house. Okay. Next, learn how to love beyond the conflict. Don't carry it. Learn how to love beyond the conflict. Don't carry the conflict. Because if you carry the conflict, guess what you carry? It'll give birth to blame. And you can hide blame at first, but eventually, it'll come back as a joke. They'll be talking and it'll just come out in conversation. Yeah, but you did that thing. What was that? Then again, yeah, remember you did that thing. Then eventually you keep blaming and all of a sudden it gets more comfortable. And then when you get upset, you lean into the blaming. Learn to love beyond the conflict. Don't carry it. Next, always remind yourself your spouse is not the conquest. They're not a conquest. They're not a foe. They're not the enemy. They're not the enemy. Always remind yourself they're not my enemy. And you're not the enemy. Okay? Finally, number 16. Your love always speaks louder than your truth. Remember that. I have all the facts. I'm right. You don't build a marriage off of being right any more than you break one off of being wrong. Your love speaks louder than your truth. Ephesians 4:15 talks about the truth and love. Make sure your love is louder than your truth. Those are 16 ideas of building value in marital conflicts, and I'll stop right there. That's enough. We'll stop there. Hopefully that helps.